Just like that. I haven't said that for a while. Tommy Cooper, that. Just like that. Classic. Absolute classic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I am your host, as always, Kane Sims, and today I am going to be having an epic conversation with JP, who is the co-founder and CTO of Smartbots. We're going to be talking large language models, generative AI. We're going to be talking Amazon Bedrock with the Smartbots platform and how brands can build applications utilizing Smartbots, Amazon Bedrock, foundation models, and large language models. Things to watch out for, challenges you might see, opportunities that exist. The top questions that brands have, we will have answered during the next hour or so. I'm going to introduce JP in just one moment, but first, I absolutely need to tell you about the AI World Series, which is happening next May in Dubai. If you are working on AI, generative AI, or more traditional forms of AI, if you're working on conversational AI, any use cases involving AI, if you feel as though what you're working on is spectacularly award-worthy, then you can enter the AI World Series. There's categories for all different types of AI deployments in insurance, healthcare, travel, hospitality, education, logistics, entertainment, e-commerce, government, utilities, you name it. And there's very specific kind of product-focused categories as well, which is the best use of generative AI in product, the best use of generative AI for a text application, image application, video, image, audio, the best predictive analytics AI product, you name it. There is so many different categories covering the width and breadth of AI capabilities. And so, as I said, if you are working on something, doesn't matter where you are in the world, you could be absolutely anywhere in the world. If you are working on something that is award worthy, then you should definitely consider entering. If you're a consultancy or a system integrator that's working on behalf of clients, you can enter. If you are a brand that's doing some interesting stuff, you can enter. If you're a vendor that's doing some interesting stuff, you can also enter. The literally, it's as wide as you can make it. So if you are working on anything that is interesting, that you're proud of, and you want you and your team and your company or your clients to get the recognition that they deserve, then please consider entering the AI World Series. You can go to aiworldseries.com/enter to find out a lot more about it. And so hopefully you will do that. And the other thing that we're doing, let me just see if I can find it. It is the Call and Contact Center Expo. It's going to be in 2 weeks' time in London. It's at the XL Arena. And you name all of the brands that you would expect to be there are there. All of the customer experience and AI automation platforms are going to be there. Some of the world's largest brands, certainly the country's largest brands that are doing some interesting stuff with AI and customer experience are going to be there. Co-op, Deliveroo, AA, Alliance Insurance, Aviva, American Express, Barclays, BBC, Boots, Department for Work and Pensions, Vodafone, you name it. It's going to be absolutely full of people pushing the boundaries as far as customer experience is concerned. And yours truly is giving a little talk as well on whether or not AI in the call centre is a danger, threat, or an opportunity. I think for those of you who listen to this podcast, you definitely know where I stand on the matter. But there's a lot of questions right now about the ethical use of AI, the responsible use of AI, and what it's going to do for the job market, certainly in the contact center and call center and customer experience. And I do have a lot of thoughts on that. There's been lots of research published on potential forecasts into that area, and I'm going to be talking about all of that on the 29th of November, so 29th to 30th. So if you are around London, get yourself there. You can go to callandcontactcenterexpo.co.uk. It's a bit of a mouthful, so I will put the links in the show notes so you can go ahead and find out more about that. So anyway, without further ado, boys and girls, please welcome JP, this co-founder and CTO of Smartbots. JP, welcome to VBUX World, my friend.
Hey, Ken, it's nice to be here. I'm JP. Jayaprakash is my full name. People know me as JP, and I'm the co-founder at Smartbots. And I'm really excited to be part of your show today. And at this point of time in India, we celebrate Diwali, which is a festival of lights. And there's a lot of fun, excitement going around. And last 1 week, I've been spending good quality time with my family and friends. A lot of energy, a lot of excitement. And the next week is going to be also exciting because I'll be at Las Vegas. I'll be attending AWS reInvent. While I'll also have fun at Las Vegas, I'm also excited to know what AWS has to announce. Looking forward for that. So all excitement all around last week, next week. Yeah, really excited.
Wicked. Sounds good. Well, happy Diwali to you and to everyone else that celebrates it. Definitely a happy time of year, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Cool. So, I mean, yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. Generally in this space of AI, and it feels as though every week on the podcast we mention since last November, you know. But it does. It's still the interest, the hype, the kind of attention is still going. OpenAI is still persevering with updates, and the GPTs that are now being given the capability for people to build their own GPTs, and that's kind of over the last 2 weeks just skyrocketed, and everyone's now building their own GPTs. The jury's still out, I think, long term, what that market looks like and what the real value of these things are. However, the attention is there. Brands are certainly interested. The platforms like the Smartbots of the world are certainly incorporating this kind of technology into their platforms, and so it's definitely an exciting time to be around the AI space. We're definitely going to get into all of that in just a moment, but maybe first it might be interesting for people to hear, what a bit about yourself and a bit about Smartbots, really. So, what's your experience? Where did Smartbots come from, and what do Smartbots do?
Absolutely. So I'll start by introducing or giving a gist of how my background or about my education background and then my initial work. That's very relevant to the kind of work we are doing today, and therefore I'll spend a minute there. I'm a graduate from computer science from IIT Madras, and my mainstream was into data structures and algorithms. And I joined a company which is into bioinformatics, and I used to do language processing. This is back in 2006. I was working on natural language processing, entity extraction, and all that fancy stuff. And back then, it was not as cool as it is today. AI was not as cool as it today, especially in the tech space, the language understanding space. So again, so there back then I was a software developer, coding all this, writing all these algorithms in Python, and it was all exciting. But that was not it. I was keen on solving real enterprise problems. I was very passionate about taking the bar high to the next level, and that's when I met my co-founder Charan. So Charan comes with vast enterprise experience. So, and I come with data science and software architecture background. So both of us got together. This was about 5 years back, and text was our area of interest. Natural language processing was both of our areas of interest. And then we went to enterprises trying to help them solve their customer support automation problem. We did a bunch of good quality automation solutions. We used a lot of cognitive services, which AWS provides. And then we built a few of them on our own. And then we gained a lot of experience in this domain, support automation domain. And yeah, so past 1 year, we put all that knowledge together in addition to our the industry knowledge that we have gathered over years, all of that into Smartbot Studio. So that's how the studio took shape. And we were in the process of building this studio, and then November 2022 happened, and then a lot of different pivots we have taken with the large language models coming into picture in a good way. And there's a lot of, the best part is a lot of people started listening to what we are doing and are interested, and more than what it was before that. And then past 1 year has been crazy. We have been actively involved in productizing all the learnings that we have got over the past 5 years. And then we released the studio, the beta version recently, and it is, yeah, that has been our journey so far, Kane.
And so a lot of companies, we had BotPress on the podcast a little while back, and Sylvain from BotPress was saying that, kind of similar journey it sounds as though you've kind of been through, which is for a long while working on a platform and a studio that is intended to, largely using intent-based NLU models and a dialogue manager and all that kind of stuff to provide businesses with these capabilities. And then large language models began to gain a lot more traction, although, some platforms have been using them since before 2022, obviously, and I'm sure you have got experience with it from prior to that as well. But that was when a lot of platforms have started to really reimagine things. And Sylvain from BotPress was telling me that the approach that he took was that really he had to go and redesign from the ground up everything that he'd been building for the last 3 years because things have changed that dramatically. Whereas some of the other platforms, some of the kind of Gartner Magic Quadrant platforms, for example, they've taken a more iterative approach where they've kind of put large language models into the solution and they're part of it, but they're not a kind of it's not from the ground up kind of overhaul sort of thing. So where would you say that you are with Smartbots, and how has that impacted what you've been doing with the studio? Is it a from the ground up complete re-architecture and a different paradigm, or is it more kind of incrementally implementing capabilities where it makes sense?
Yeah, for us, the timing worked really well. So we started developing the studio sometime in August, September last year, and we were doing all the conceptualization for some time, and that's when we worked on large language models even before ChatGPT became famous. In fact, we were in one of our enterprise solutions, we have used OpenAI's embeddings for doing an FAQ based bot, right? So that was all custom development before our studio came in. So that area is something which we were familiar with. And in terms of the application development, the product Smartbot Studio development, our timing really worked out. We didn't have to re-engineer any of the stuff because we were at that time building our product. And by April, we got the first cut of our product beta version, which we have announced at Call and Contact Center Expo in Las Vegas. So that I would say, the timing worked really well. And in terms of what is under the hood, we have taken best of both worlds. We are using a concept of using a graph, a network X graph combined with large language models to solve the conversational AI problems. And so most of the architecture was based on large language models behind the scene. And we believe that large language models cannot be treated as a black box on which you build a thin layer of application. I don't think that's how it would work for enterprises. We need a reasonable size of an application layer on top of this large language models for enterprises to have enough control when they do the deployment. So, and that's what our studio helps enterprises do. So that's how we have architected it.
Yeah, and we've spoke about this a couple of times on the podcast as well, which is and generally through articles and posts or whatever, is that kind of concept of, because these foundation models are so available, certainly through OpenAI. Like OpenAI are trying as hard as they possibly can to democratize access to this kind of stuff. Every time there's a new release, the price comes down. Every time there's a new feature, they try as best as they can to remove the requirement to code, like with the new GPTs feature and stuff like that. And so the availability of the models themselves are so broadly available. It's a bit harder to, I suppose, for inexperienced developer, or not inexperienced, someone who doesn't code, to get their hands on an open source model, for example. It becomes more of a technical challenge. But generally speaking, a lot of models are available. There's lots of products that can be built on top of these models, as we've seen with the Grammarly's of the world and stuff like that. And so, from a product standpoint, one of the questions that is yet to be answered is, what long-term solution exists for those kind of products that are just, as you say, pretty much thin layers on top of a foundation model. Not saying that Grammarly specifically is, but there's lots of products out there that are. Even GPTs themselves actually are inherently a thin layer on top of ChatGPT, really. So for brands that are kind of utilizing the APIs on their own, and they're kind of building some sort of thin layer on top of it, what's missing? You mentioned control and stuff like that. Like, what's missing on the application layer to give brands more control, and more, what features are kind of missing to make that solution more of a solution that a brand can sort of build their own stuff within, rather than a thin layer on top, if that makes sense?
Sure. So there are multiple use cases of large language models. So large language models are impacting technology and solutions across multiple verticals and multiple industries. So there will be definitely cases where you can live with a thin layer of application on top of this foundation models. But a major portion, especially for enterprise support automation solutions, which is our area of interest, I see that there is a middle ground that we need to strike. The legacy systems, as we call, where we have intent based and workflow based, where you need to draw each and every step in the conversation flow, is on one end. And on the other end, you have GPT-4 kind of models, which are really strong, really powerful, but the application layer on top of that is very thin. So that makes the lose for enterprises, they lose control because it's a big black box. It is a double-edged sword. At one side, it is powerful, but at the same time, enterprises might end up compromising their brand or entering into a data security issue at a later stage. So these are the various concerns which I see when enterprises are dealing with this large language model. So to solve this problem, we have hit the middle ground. And that's what we call as the large language model plus graph solution, where the idea is, this is again specific to customer support, where we say that business users are already comfortable building business processes, right? So they use Lucid Chat, for example, to define a process. Say, for example, when an order the status has to be retrieved, has to be provided to the end customer. Maybe at the end of the conversation, you need to send an SMS to the customer with the status update. This could be a standard business practice which enterprises might have taken a conscious call, keeping in mind various business reasons, be it brand recall or some other aspects. Now that, if you take an autonomous agent or something closer to an autonomous agent or a custom GPT as we are calling it today, there the call is taken by, when to send an SMS is taken by the autonomous agent under the hood, right? So which is like a black box. That is a concern which I've practically seen for most of the enterprises. See, the thing is, the build problem is not really difficult for enterprises, which with this custom GPT solutions, the build problem is getting solved. But my question is that really a challenge? Or enterprises, are the main concern is how to help their customers do a self-serve to their customers. The build problem, enterprises are okay to put the energy in building it the right way. So we are trying to hit the middle ground. Not sure if I'm answering your
Mm.
question to the point, but I'm trying
Yeah,
to cover multiple points here.
yeah, of course, yeah. So I get what you're saying. So on the one hand, you've got the intent-based stuff, define every single in and out of any flow where it's all very deterministic and nothing happens outside of what's being scoped, essentially. On the other side, you have the large language model black box, which makes its own decisions and does its own thing, which is no control over, and you don't know if it's doing the right thing. That middle ground that you're suggesting there, what does that look like specifically for Smartbots? Is it a case of, there is a business process that's defined that is more deterministic, but then you're leveraging large language models to maybe understand what the user has said, possibly generate some responses, but you're leaving the logic to be more deterministic? Like, what is that kind of middle ground?
You nailed it. It's exactly the middle ground has automation, as we call it. And again, we are leveraging a lot of build automation using really powerful large language models. So, but if you are a business user, and this studio is built for business users, not for bot developers. If you are a business user, today you would be doing the same process definition on Lucid Chat. With our solution, you can do the same thing, just the way you do it on Lucid Chat. You can do the same process design on Smartbot Studio. And now, in addition to the getting a process design, which is a simple image, you'll also get a bot or a conversational assistant to which follows this graph, which follows this process, and then answers the questions accordingly. So it uses the large language model plus graph is the underlying secret sauce, as we call it, which the large language models at each step is guided by the graph. And the graph is quite simple. The process flow is quite simple, which has name, description at each stage. And then that acts as an anchor for the bot to respond to the user at every stage. There are a lot of small functions that we have defined internally. There are tons of them where LLMs are used. I'll take few examples. Like at any point of time, humans tend to shift between one topic to another topic. And LLMs are good at identifying that the user has shifted from topic A to topic B. And we use that function, that feature, to determine if there's a topic shift. This is powered by an LLM. For this, the we don't use it as a black box, but we use it as a, 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 a new function which was earlier not possible, and we wire all of that together in the Smartbot Studio. So that's the application layer that I was talking about, which is quite thick on top of large language models. Hope that gives
Yeah.
that some sense on how we are approaching this problem.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're talking about graph, you're talking about as not necessarily a knowledge graph as such. You're talking about a process map where you would
That's right.
define
That's
the
a process
process.
map.
I'm with you. Yeah. So then at each stage of that process map, presumably you've got the ability to create effectively your own prompts that guide what should happen at each of those stages. Is that right? You define presumably what do you define the model you want to use, define the prompts you want to use, and does that happen at each stage of the process?
That's right. That's right. So the at each stage, so the a graph acts as an anchor, and then the inputs that a business user gives on what has to be done at each stage is converted to a prompt, an intelligent prompt with a lot of context attached to it, and then that is sent to an LLM, and that's how the graph, the process gets converted to a conversational assistant.
I'm with you. Right. And that's where the no code bit comes in because you're basically having the business user just describe what happens at each stage, and then you have a prompt behind the scenes that you insert that into that then
Right.
takes on the action between the platform and the model.
That's exactly how we do.
Right, interesting. And how do you kind of one of the things that I'm sure you've had this question a lot. I'm sure you will continue to get this question all the time. It's one of the concerns that brands have when it comes to using large language models in any description, regardless of how much control we try and wrap around them, is the whole idea of hallucination. And that some brands are kind of a little bit trepidatious, for want of a better phrase around using it because they feel as though they can't control the output and they are not really sure about how much license they should give these models to generate stuff on the brand's behalf. How do you kind of approach that conversation with clients? Are clients concerned about this thing hallucinating, concerned about not having any control over it? What's that discussion like? And then how do you try and navigate that within the platform?
Yeah, so there are two parts of this question that you've asked. First part is how do we talk to our client and educate them about hallucination, and then tell them about the concerns, where to take care, and how to let loose this concern, right? So that's the first part, which is the most difficult part because there's a lot of client related. At an enterprise level, there are a lot of hoops that we need to cross to get to that level of convincing a customer. And the other part is on a technology front, how are we dealing with hallucination? I'll take the first
Mm-hmm.
part on how we talk to enterprises. And this is a real big challenge, to be honest. And there is only one client today we have done a production deployment because, and not because of the technology gap. This is purely because of the wait and watch approach the clients are taking today with large language models. And one of the clients we were successful because we were able to convince them on what is the effect of hallucination when a bot is built using our studio. So they were quite keen on the technology front. They were, and it was a relatively a small customer, so they took this as a challenge and then we moved forward. It is definitely a challenge because the what clients are seeing is the general hallucination effect out with the large language models and with a very thin application layer, right? So if you build a bot giving an instruction, be it a custom GPT or an assistant using an API, where you give a small set of instructions and a set of documents that are attached and a set of actions which the bot can determine which one to pick. All this is a black box and there's a great chance of hallucination. That is what we are fighting with when we are trying to educate the customers that that's not the approach that we are taking in Smartbot Studio. There's a great amount of application layer, as I said, where all these factors are considered, and we are not using LLM as just a black box, right? So that is a challenge, and to be honest with you, we are still fighting that fight with most of our enterprise customers. The second
Mm-hmm.
part of the conversation is on the technology front of how we are handling hallucination. Now, hallucination is not a big problem in our approach that we have taken. I'll quote one example, a function that we have built on top of large language models. See, the function is used for LLM. We use LLMs for entity extraction. We don't use it for response generation, right? So there, LLMs do a really good job for the traditional entity extraction. When you say for the flight booking example, how many passengers are traveling, and if you give an answer that two of us are traveling or three of us are traveling, for the traditional entity extraction models, it is easy. But if someone says that I'm traveling with two of my kids, the traditional entity extraction problems fail there. And that is where LLMs can be used. And we are using LLMs for that purpose. Now, there's no concern about hallucination here at all because we are not generating, we are using it for decision making. That's one application. And later in a different application, we are using it for deviation. As I quoted in the earlier example, we are trying to understand if the conversation is getting deviated from the natural flow, from the actual defined flow, if people are jumping from one topic to another. That decision, which is a pure JSON response that we get back, we are doing that using LLMs. So the way we have built LLMs, these LLM functions which are plugged into our dialogue management system, are giving the best of both worlds. It is having a control, and then there is no hallucination concept at all. That's one side. And talking about the response generation, where there's a great possibility of hallucination, we have a lever there for enterprises. They can choose to either give the response as it is, which they have composed. They always have an option to configure their responses. Most of the responses are auto-generated. Thanks to, again, large language models, we are auto-generating most of the responses on the studio. But if users want to tailor it, they have an option to tailor it, and then there's a lever which they can control, just like the temperature in this large language models, one factor which you can configure. We gave a lever to the customers to, based on the use case, the amount of the risk they can expose this bot to. That is all in the control of the enterprise. That's how we are handling the technology and business challenges. Frankly, business challenges are the most difficult ones. Technology challenges we are able to solve to a great extent.
Yeah, yeah. It's not you're not the first company to say that large language models have not been used in response generation, especially in customer support. I think brands are generally a bit more kind of risk averse to that. It's actually hard enough sometimes to convince them to actually go with a traditional NLU bot because of the fact that it's some external system entity that's not their people, basically. So it's definitely kind of, I can definitely agree with that. Shout out to Victor Rojo, who's saying good to see you as well, Victor. Andrew has said around this is the conversation we were having earlier on about Grammarly. I would recommend that you read the Grammarly technical blog. They've been playing with machine learning for quite a while. No doubt, absolutely no doubt. And when I said earlier on about it being a thin layer on top of a large language model, I was being a bit facetious. I was just using Grammarly as an example of a product, but there's plenty of products that are definitely thin layers over the top of these large language models. David, about your last example, JP has said very useful distinctions, thank you, in terms of where you're using LLMs in the application side. That's great stuff. And yeah, I think that the general awareness and understanding from brands about this stuff is an area that needs to sort of be addressed, because I think that when you see OpenAI and you see GPTs and you see ChatGPT, and it's kind of like it leads you to believe that everything needs to be generated by AI, whereas the generation part is only good for so far for more creative endeavors, really. It's like, and even if for some of those, if there's writers and linguists among the listenership, then you will know that if you ask ChatGPT or Claude or Bard or any large language model to write you something, it's not actually great at writing. It's like, I've tried and tried and tried to try and get these models to write blog articles successfully. I'll feed it podcast transcripts, I'll feed it notes, I'll give it absolutely all sorts of guidance. I've tried loads of different types of prompts, and every single time it does a good enough job of summarizing what's in the podcast, but it does a terrible job of wording the article in a way that's pleasurable to read. So they are good at certain things and not so good at others. And the generation of responses, I can understand brands being cautious about that, and I can understand the decisions that you would make around, not having that as a mandatory thing, basically. Um, what are your thoughts on? It sounds as though a lot of what you're doing is process oriented, which makes sense. Customer service, customer support. Every use case has got a defined process, and that doesn't change regardless of whether you've got generative AI or not. If you want to report a stolen credit card or block a card, or you want to change your address, or you want to, check on a delivery, the process is the process. It doesn't really matter what generative AI tells you to do. The process is the process. However, a lot of the use cases around large language models that are slightly less mature than that process-driven ones are the ones around kind of question answering, and the solutions that many kind of gravitate towards in that realm is the retrieval augmented generation, which is a you don't have to use that to generate content as such. You could use it to pick out the content that exists and just verbatim read that content back. But you could use it to have a large language model and a vector database, draw up on various different sources, and then have a large language model summarize and reword and all that kind of stuff. Where do you stand on retrieval augmented generation as a solution?
Yeah, so most of the use cases that we encounter today have this retrieval augmented RAG as one of the mandatory feature that we hear from most of the customers we interact with. And we on the studio we support retrieval augmented generation, and so you can upload your documents, or you can link it to your documents, which could be on Google Drive or any other portal. And we have our own chunking strategy. We have our embedding. I mean, we use underlying foundation models to generate the embeddings, and then we support multiple vector databases, be it Pinecone and few others. So that entire setup is available on the studio, and we always keep the enterprise customers in mind when we do the solutions. And so there also there are specific requirements that enterprises have, right? So they don't want to share the documents. They want to link to the documents. They want the solution to be deployed in their environment, including the embeddings. They want it in their environment. So all this is what we are supporting. So we are taking the RAG to the next level to make it enterprise grade. While most of the solutions out there, including the custom GPT, which was recently announced, which supports RAG, that I feel is the early cut, the first cut, because see, chunking strategy is an important factor while you're designing RAG, right? We need to provide an option based on the document type on which chunking strategy would work for that particular use case. All this, it's not like one size fits all kind of a solution which was announced by custom GPT, right? So in the custom GPT, so that those problems we are keeping enterprise in mind and have solved that on Smartbot Studio. And the next one is about FAQs. FAQs are also, we treat them similar to RAG. It's a kind of a solution where all the FAQs convert to an embedding, and then we use again a large language model to augment the matching FAQ and then generate a response. So we do this two steps, and this is again configurable on Smartbot Studio. If you want a standalone FAQ bot or a document bot, both of them are possible on Smartbot Studio.
Interesting. I did have a question about the FAQs, but I'll come on to that in a moment. On the retrieval augmented generation side, the ChatGPT GPTs feature, I don't know if you saw this, but somebody found a kind of hack with that, where depending on the prompt you give it, you can actually get access to the documents that have been uploaded to train the GPTs, which is scary and definitely a hole that OpenAI should be plugging if they haven't already. The chunking strategy always seems to me at least to be a challenging thing to do, because you need to know the content in order to properly chunk it, basically. The content also needs to be decent. I mean, the amount of brands, I'm sure you've come across many brands that their content is a mess. and they don't even know where it is, or if they do, it's in loads of different types of places, and it's like, a knowledge base over here that gets used for one thing, and a CMS over there that's got duplicate content or slightly different content over here, and it's kind of like, one, quality of content is an issue. Two, the kind of format and structure of the content is an issue, because if you're going to chunk it effectively, the content itself needs to be decent in the first place. So how do you approach that? You said there's different chunking strategies. Like, how do you approach that particular task of making sure that you can chunk up the data appropriately to give the model the best chance of finding the right content?
Yeah, so the fundamental approach, the philosophy that we follow is, at the build stage, we use extensively large language models, right? So even for chunking, we use large language models. So a chunk is a good chunk if we are able to make it as cohesive as possible. The chunk should have all the relevant information about a particular topic. And LLMs are good at identifying those chunks. The traditional chunking strategies are around, say, paragraph-wise you chunk, or you chunk based on the number of characters. So these are the traditional ones, but we spend a good amount of time, in the sense, when you do a build on a document, it doesn't happen immediately. It takes some amount of time because we chunk it based on, we use an LLM to do the chunking. And this will solve a lot of problems, because the embeddings finally that get generated from this chunking are all vetted to avoid duplicates and all. So those problems are solved at the build time itself to a great extent. And of course, there will be challenges where there will be a duplicate entries across documents. And today we are supporting up to 100 documents, which is a small set as per my understanding with the enterprise, in an enterprise scenario. But 100 documents, we are fine tuning our approach to reach a high quality RAG responses. We are also coming up with our own way, metrics to measure the quality of RAG. And finally, there's another research that we are doing on how fine tuning underlying model can help in the quality of the RAG responses. So there are multiple works, and this is still an evolving field even for Smartbots. But today, with 100 documents, we are confident, and each document can have up to 100 pages. So that's the size, that's the volume that we are confident, and we are taking up those kind of assignments only with the customers. But there's lot to do, lot coming up. We are also waiting for the overall the data science community to solve most of the problems around RAG. RAG at an MVP level looks cool, but at a production grade has its own challenges.
Yeah, we've found that as well. You mentioned there, having a process and techniques around the quality. I definitely want to get onto the how do you measure the quality of it. But first, are you using RAG in the sense of you're doing the chunking, and then you're taking content and regurgitating that content, as in it's just verbatim whatever is in the data is what gets produced, or are you also summarizing and generating responses in that use case, or is it a bit of both?
So our APIs give both the reference material and the index of from where we are picking up the answer, just like how most of the RAG solutions today provide. Our APIs do both, and now it is on the channel side. So this solution can be deployed on Teams. Then we have a connector and adapter for Teams, where you can see both the bot response and the reference text. Both are presented.
Okay, fair enough. And then you said there that you're working on measuring the quality of RAG. Like, this is one of the things that large language models is, at least from where I stand, is a gap in all of the applications I've seen regarding large language models and generative AI. It's the quality assurance of it, particularly if you're using it to generate responses to customers. How to make sure those responses are accurate, true, in line with the brand, for example, and all the solutions that I've come across today all use large language models to do that quality assurance, which may be the right way to do it, but it also sounds a little bit like marking your own homework a little bit. So I'm just curious about how people are approaching the whole quality assurance side of it. So I don't know whether you have a solution that's, boxed off and fixed and sorted. You said you're waiting for the data scientist community to kind of catch up, but generally speaking, where are your thoughts at the moment in terms of quality assurance and measuring the quality of this stuff?
So we are partnering with another company in this domain because this needs a lot of science around it, and I kind of have an idea on how they are approaching this problem. So they again, like you said, they are using the best quality LLM as a benchmark, GPT-4 or Claude 2 as a benchmark to measure the quality of the RAG, and that's what we are also doing today. And I'm definitely, as you said, rightly said, I'm not 100% happy with the approach, but today that's what we have, and we want to see like how you have F1 scores for intent classifications and confusion metrics for all the traditional data science problems. We need some quality metrics, and I talked to a few data scientists in the Bay Area, and they are coming. They say that there's something coming up, and we are also waiting to see how that would turn out to be.
Yeah, it's definitely something that needs attention, doesn't it? Because I think one of the kind of biggest gaps generally is whenever we do webinars or podcasts or anything around kind of like chatbot or AI assistant optimization, it's always well received. And the last one we did a few weeks ago with Wisdom, we asked the attendees, we did a poll and said who has a kind of proven, stable, consistent optimization process. And I think something like 50 or 60% of attendees said that they didn't. So there's definitely a gap, even in the traditional conversational AI solutions, around quality assurance and analytic performance and measurement, and making sure you're measuring the right things and that the improvements that you make are being focused in the right areas and that you're having the right impact. And then that problem is compounded with large language models because of the non-deterministic nature of them, and also the benefits of them is also the drawback, which is that you don't necessarily have to specify the conversations to be had. As long as you've got the data that could answer the queries, it's almost like, well, the data's there. We'll allow people to say whatever it is that they want to say, and as long as we can answer the question in the data, we'll answer it. It's not rather than the other way around, which is let's define all of the things that we're going to allow people to say, and then build the answers in underneath that. So the nature of the large language model solutions means that if you don't really know what people are going to say, it's very difficult to then start tracking your accuracy against that. You know what I'm saying? So there's definitely a
Yeah,
gap there, and I'm curious to see how it goes.
yeah, sure. Same with me. I'm really the metrics is something which has been bothering like most of the people bothering smartbots as well, and we are trying out a lot of ways internally, and things are working out. We are using, I mean, even for the test case generation, we are using large language models, but on both sides, it's all large language models. On both the
Yeah.
test case generation measurement, you're relying heavily on large language models, and that's one challenge. I think we'll have to wait and watch how people are going to solve that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might not. That might be the best solution. That's just that sometimes, if the model changes, everything changes, which is it's a big dependency, isn't it? Like I forget the chap's name now, and I'm really sorry for forgetting this, but I will. Let me see if I can quickly dig it out. But he's going to be on the. Hopefully, he's going to be on the podcast soon. He's a chap called. What's he called? Sorry, mate. John Railing. John Railing. He's done a lot of analysis on the kind of performance of GPT-4, extensive benchmarking, and then GPT-4 Turbo was released. And essentially, a lot of things have changed. Some things for the better, but some things not so much. I know I was sidetracked there because I was trying to find the guy's profile. But essentially, what he's done is he's done a lot of benchmarking on GPT-4 and had a lot of data. Did the same benchmark with the updated model, and yeah, some things have changed for the better, some things have changed for the worse. And so the concern that I have around all this kind of stuff around relying on measuring the performance with the same tools that are used to generate the solution is that when the model changes, it's impossible to work out what's actually changed. Therefore, it's impossible to work out whether the things that are still the things you're measuring, the way that the application's being built, and everything is it still performing as it was? I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that. I know you've got, like, we can get into some of the solutions around Amazon Bedrock, and there's lots of different models behind. Probably there isn't an over reliance on one particular model in your kind of architecture, but I'm wondering whether you've given that any thought around kind of, yeah, what happens if the
Sure.
models change and all that kind of stuff. How do you insure against it?
Yeah. So if we look only at the first module, which is the process-based flows, right? So and we'll talk about FAQs and documents subsequently. But if you are looking at the process flows, the way we have built the application layer is thick, and therefore the reliance on underlying LLM has come down significantly. For in our case, so we have tried multiple models without changing the process. We shifted from one AI 21 model to then Claude 1, then Claude 2, and then this is all on Bedrock. And then we tried the same on uh, Azure OpenAI's 3.5 Turbo, and we have tried it on DaVinci. The underlying models, all this we have tried without changing the process, and the output was consistent. And the reason for that consistency is because we have the process driving the entire conversation. There was a quality difference in terms of deviation handling. For example, we do make use of the LLM to determine if there's a deviation. And when we move to a higher quality model, they are able to predict the deviation quite well compared to an underlying model. But for an enterprise, this is a compromised experience, but not a showstopper. It's not a red flag for them. It's not a compromise at a brand level or at an enterprise level. It is just it looks like, okay, we are moving from if we change the underlying model, the quality of the bot deteriorates, but it is still within the guardrails. That's how we are solving the process problem.
Mm-hmm.
The second
Interesting.
and third is on the FAQs and documents, where FAQs and documents, where we have this problem of, like, when we shift from one model to another, the build part is fine. We'll generate the build embeddings using one model in the first go. But subsequently, when you are in the runtime, when we are hitting this, when we are shifting to between one model to another model, then the responses change a lot, and that's one area of concern for us today. And we are figuring out how to get that also streamlined, so that we want to make it model agnostic, at least to a set of commonly used models. We want to make this as an option for the enterprise, because few enterprises are on AWS, few are on Microsoft. So we want to provide that option to the end user, so that they can pick the cloud of their choice and then connect, because the existing stack, their application stack, their relation with underlying with the cloud provider could determine which model to pick.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
important for us to make it LLM agnostic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we spoke about RAG. You also mentioned FAQs. Presumably, that is where a customer, a brand has a list of FAQs, questions, answers, and you're in that instance. Are you fine tuning a model with that data? Is that how you would describe that process? Or if not, what's the difference between the FAQ solution and the RAG solution?
Yeah, so fine tuning is a custom service that we are doing today on a case to case basis. We have the framework outside the studio where we can fine tune the solution. And what we typically do is we are very careful about fine tuning a model without validating the data which is going in. Fine tuning, our understanding is, it's not as easy as it looks. You need to, it's garbage in, garbage out. And the fine tuning methods are also multiple different methods are there. So what we are doing today is we are initiating with the base model, and we are letting the conversations on. We are releasing the product, and after a couple of months, we have enough data that is generated. That data we are using for fine tuning the underlying model, and this is happening only for few select models today with Llama and few other models. We are doing this fine tuning option. And where there is a private deployment, enterprises are keen on fine tuning. That is when we are shifting to fine tuning. Otherwise, we are heavily dependent on retrieval augmented process.
Yeah. Interesting. So today, then, if someone was to use the kind of FAQ component and not RAG, is that what do you do? Do you feed the questions and answers into a prompt and then ask the LLM to figure out the answer into that, or is there a different way of doing it?
So it's exactly like RAG. So each FAQ is like a chunk,
All right,
all right? So yeah,
right.
you have a, and we do a vector. This FAQs convert to embeddings. They are stored in database, and then we do a closest matching embedding. We take more than one embedding. We do disambiguation of FAQs and get to the right FAQ at the end.
I'm with you. Fair enough. Fair enough. That makes sense. And so, yeah, the decision going back to what you were saying around being LLM agnostic and stuff like that makes sense. What kind of was or why was the decision to use Amazon Bedrock taken? And I wonder whether first of all, maybe for those that don't know, whether we could explain Amazon Bedrock, and then why that solution was the solution you went with.
Yes. So first of all, about Amazon Bedrock is a service which recently AWS has released. To keep it simple, it is a collection of a lot of foundation models which are developed by a few leading AI companies. AI 21, Anthropic is the one of the big player in the space today. All these models are now available via Amazon Bedrock. And apart from providing access to these foundation models, Bedrock also provides more functionalities to fine tune the underlying large language model and there's a new feature called Amazon Bedrock agents where you can build the actions on top of the Amazon Bedrock foundation models. So there's a lot of action, a lot of things happening on Amazon Bedrock, and I'm actually curious to hear more updates on what Bedrock is going to come up with at reInvent the month at the end of the month. So that's about Bedrock. And we chose Bedrock. We are AWS conversational AI competency partner. We work closely with the AWS team. And initially, when Amazon Lex was released back then, we tried out few of the models, and we even helped Amazon. Uh, we worked with their engineering team, built few uh, industry use cases, and got them deployed onto the Lex platform. And they are also available as templates that enterprises can take and play around. So our relation goes long with AWS. So that's one reason why we went to Bedrock. Apart from that, AWS has done it differently compared to Microsoft. Microsoft, I feel the underlying both the clouds providers, they finally have to sell the infrastructure. The underlying models and infrastructure is what their business models are all around primarily. While the application layer is like what we have seen recently, which OpenAI has announced, which is around the assistants and the custom GPT, is just a way they are showing to the world on how to build applications on top of the foundation models. I feel the strategy which OpenAI is following is methods of how to innovatively sell their underlying foundation models. Finally, they'll have to sell foundation models. Microsoft has to sell the infrastructure. That's how they are. That's how I believe they are taking this approach. They are taking this route. On the other hand, AWS is trying to keeping the enterprise in mind. They are trying to give multiple options or different sizes, different providers. Each foundation model has its own strength. Now, 2024, the way we are envisioning the market to evolve is that there'll be about 50-60% of the customers who will be okay to get exposed to public LLMs, the powerful ones, GPT-4 or Claude 2 kind of LLMs, but there'll be a significant portion of population who would be interested in doing the private deployments. And because their use cases are small and their compliances are tight, they would want to go with a small model, maybe a Llama 7B, and then do a simple chat summarization for their ticketing system. Those kind of use cases are definitely high value because there's a lot of back office work which happens in customer support. So these options are possible with Bedrock. And my gut check is that AWS is going to provide multiple size foundation models for each of this kind of problems. And that's another reason why we went for Amazon Bedrock.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Amazon definitely will have a clear focus on enterprise customers. You know, the whole that's obviously what AWS is basically, and then I think Microsoft will still be targeting enterprises via the OpenAI capabilities. OpenAI for me seem to be trying to go to market a little bit more like a B2C kind of company,
Exactly.
like an Alexa or a Google Assistant or something like that. You know, like these GPTs. If you look at every single GPT that I've seen so far, it's all been the equivalent of an Alexa skill. It's a book author uploading their books so that you can ask questions about the book, or it's a hobbyist developer creating a dad jokes thing, you know, or a recipe skill. It's all the same kind of stuff basically. So it's definitely I very much don't see brands building their own GPTs via ChatGPT anytime soon. They've tried to do the plugins. Maybe plugins might have legs. It seems as though they could be a little bit. A bit of a sensible option, but definitely from the enterprise standpoint, you know, AWS is yeah, no one ever got
Yeah.
fired for using Amazon, you know.
Yeah, it's more like a
Um,
Lego model that they have come up with for you to build on top. And see, that's what I think that as a cloud provider, they need to empower the partners in building solutions on top of it. They need to focus, all the cloud providers should focus on the science part of it, come up with more powerful more models, solve the latency problems, solve the quality problems, and then application layer should be left to the partners like us. So I mean, that's my
yeah,
personal take.
no, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. Yeah, definitely. That makes perfect sense. So tell us about the. You said that there's a client who you've got a production deployment with. Tell us a little bit about that and what that use case looks like.
sure. So this is a classic customer support use case where there's about 500 calls, voice calls that they get every day, and there are about 25 support agents addressing. And you can imagine the kind of tough time they go through, the rigor they go through to address those calls. And so customer support automation solution powered by, I mean, which we have given to them is an obvious choice. They were looking for such a solution. And but the difference is that they took the challenge and they were ready to try out an LLM powered solution which we have given, because most of the enterprises are doing going to the wait and watch approach, but this client of ours was keen, was interested, and they did all the diligence behind the scene, what is happening, what is the brand impact, all that study they have done quickly, and about a month back they got it deployed. And now the results are, I mean, we are yet to compute the final ROI and the results, but I have some numbers to share. For a week, when we ran this solution in production, where real customers were interacting with the bot, we were able to handle about 560 queries in this span of 4 days, four working days. And out of that, we got a 90% success rate. So 90% of the calls were contained and 10% were transferred to a human agent. And the calls that got transferred are also channeled to the right human agent with all the context and the relevant information so that the agents can quickly resolve. So the feedback, initial feedback, we did an interview with few set of agents there, and the feedback we got is really encouraging. They are now focusing on real serious problems and leaving the most of the work to the bot, and they are trying to scale it. Now, this is the phase one of the project where we have done one use case automation, which is one process in our language. And now we are currently developing for 5 processes, which will cover almost 80% of the call volume that comes to their agents today. And that's
Mm,
one part. And adding to this, we have also solved a problem of language barriers. So there are two languages which typically these queries come in. One is English, the other is Spanish. And with large language models, we were able to solve it quite easily, because we built the process and we give the instructions to the underlying LLM. All we had to do was because most of the calls are decision making, which is language independent. Only the response generation we had to depend on the large language model, and large language models did a good job when we give the seed right. So we in the build process, as I said, we do a lot of processing at the build level itself. So we generated all the possible responses in Spanish and ask the end user to vet them. The client has gone through each of the responses, and then they were okay with the kind of responses that are coming. And we use, again, we are not using them as it is because it looks more robotic. We use that as a seed to make it more human-like, and the quality is really good. So we solved the traditional customer support automation problem plus the language problem in this use case.
Mm. So tell me about that language bit again. So you you if I understand this correctly, so someone will talk to it in Spanish. You use the large language model to generate the response in Spanish, but in the build process during testing, you sent all of those responses to the client to make sure that it was the correct response in the correct language. And then you feed that back to the model in production so that it's close enough to that when it gets a similar query again. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, so in the build part, we use a high-end large language model, right? So we use Claude 2 for all the build related processes. And that gives us an option that gives us great flexibility because you generate all the different variations in which people can first of all ask, and then how the bot should respond. The seed is what we are generating. And this is all happening under the hood. I mean, there is a configuration option. The customers, the enterprise customers can go and modify that if needed. And that's what we have done in this case. And this, at the build phase where we are using a robust model, we get a high quality output. And in the runtime, we use a small model, which where we get the advantage of latency, and we are not generating the final response. We are giving a seed response. We are giving the full conversation. We are giving the state from the process. And then we are asking the bot that asking the large language model to give a response, appropriate response. And we have engineered that prompt so well that we get an accurate answer. And so the answer is like exactly how it would be in the build, but adjusted to the current context and the current conversation.
Very nice. So the in the build phase when you generate those initial responses and the initial utterances, you're seeding the lighter model with that at the appropriate turn. Is that am I understanding that correctly? So
At the
let's say
build
for
phase,
example, go on.
sorry. Yeah, at the build phase, we are using a high-end model. And in the
Yeah,
runtime, we are using a lightweight model. Yeah.
yeah. So so in the build phase, you use the high end model to generate the kind of responses the kind of things people might say, and the kind of responses that would be answered to that. So let's give an example of somebody asking a very simple use case of somebody asking what time is it in New York. So, or what time is it anywhere in the world? So in that build phase, you would use the good model, the high end model, to generate all of the different things, all of the different cities that someone might want to know the time in, and the different ways that they might phrase that. And then you would use the model to then translate all of that into Spanish. And then when somebody in the production environment says, I don't know, que la hora y New York, I have no idea whether that's actually true Spanish or not, but it's something like that. When they say that what time is it in New York in Spanish, do you then use that training data that you generated in the build phase to then seed that prompt so that the lighter model can kind of feed off of that in its response or not?
Right, right. So the part, I mean, it is in line with what you have, how you have narrated. There is some amount of embeddings also that we do uh,
All
at
right.
the process level where we generate the embeddings, use them. We use embeddings heavily not just for the RAG and FAQs, but even at a process level. So that initial seed input, sorry, the user input, we map it to the most relevant process, which is again a embeddings matching that we do. And once we know the response is what we have to give it in Spanish. First of all, you need to understand the language. That is one LLM check that we do to seamlessly understand whether the user input has come in Spanish or English. So we do multiple steps in the runtime using LLMs, not just one. Therefore, we are
Mm.
very particular about using a low end LLM because there you get a good quality latency. And we are dealing with voice. We cannot let the end user wait for like 10 seconds to respond. We need to do with all of this in 4 seconds. So one call to
Mm.
LLM typically takes about 2 seconds. We don't have that liberty of spending 2 seconds. So we use embeddings at multiple stages. So a lot of things
Right.
are happening at the application level, and that's where I feel that that's where when I initially said there is a thick application layer. We use all these large language models for small functions to make all these calls, and all this is like well wired under the hood, and makes the life of the enterprises. I mean, makes it very lean, and at the same time, at the build time, the user don't have to do all the complex process, all the flow charts and all. They don't have to do. All they have to do is define the process at every stage. So,
Mm.
I mean, I'm not sure if I've completely answered your query, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the Smartbots platform, is that a platform that, um, for example, if I'm a retailer and I want to utilize this, is this like a self-serve platform where I would just license it, or some kind of model where I would, consumption-based model, whatever, where I would just use it myself, or is it a kind of like a solution that goes hand in hand with Smartbots, kind of like pro services to implement? Does that make sense?
sure.
Is it a kind of hands free, I'll do it myself, or is it a kind of this needs some guidance and some help?
See, our objective is to make it do it yourself for anyone, any industry, any domain. That's the path which we are taking. And but today, the most of our customers, especially the large ones, depend on our internal process. We have two teams. One is the core team which builds this studio with all the engineering and data science background, and the other team which users. These are the first customers of our studio, and for the past 3 months we haven't opened it up for a general availability yet. Or the internal customers are only using it, and we have opened it to one partner, a technology partner who is trying to build on top of it. And by the beginning of next year we want to make it generally available. After, so we are gradually moving towards making it generally available, but the final
Nice.
objective is to make it completely do it yourself.
Nice. Perfect. Nice one. Well, JP, this has been an absolute pleasure. Absolutely intriguing. Lovely deep dive into one, the platform, and two, generally how to construct and use large language models and generative AI effectively in the enterprise. I'm sure that, if the solution is working as you describe and it's got a 90% success rate for on the phone as well is pretty impressive, then I'm sure that adoption will not be a problem. So thank you so much for joining me. And so you're gonna be in Vegas. Is that next week?
Yes, I'll be there from 26th onwards, November, and if any one of the listeners are going to be there, I'll be happy to chat, and then maybe happy to share, give access on a case-to-case basis to the studio. Early access is what we can provide, and also we can discuss a lot of interesting use cases, case studies. There's ton to discuss, and I'm really excited to meet as many people as possible. I'll be there for a week till 28th, and lining up to meet as many people as possible.
Brilliant. Well, good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing what announcements come from that as well. To be fair, Amazon definitely probably a little bit slower out of the blocks, certainly than Microsoft on this kind of stuff, but they are certainly making moves. There was announcements around Alexa incorporating large language models. They've got Amazon Bedrock, and I'm sure that they'll be definitely making a strong push towards building out more capabilities and more features and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what
Sure.
happens there. If you are going to be there, if you're tuning in, definitely drop by and see JP and Smartbots. If you're not, then you can always visit the Smartbots website. Is it smartbots.com?
It's smartbots.ai, and my mail ID is also very simple, jp at smartbots.ai. So you can shoot out an
Perfect.
email, or I'm easily you can find me on LinkedIn as well and shoot out a message. I'll be happy to respond.
Perfect. We'll do that. We'll put your LinkedIn on in the show notes. We'll stick the website in the show notes as well. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been wicked.
Thank you, Kane. It's really good talking to you today.
Likewise. And thank you all for tuning in. We are next week. What are we doing next week? Next week we will be speaking with Noble. Noble is on VUX World next week. We're going to be discussing how Noble are getting on with their platform, their opinions on the market and stuff like that. So maybe a continuation of a similar kind of discussion to today. So do join us for that if you are around. And without further ado, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll speak